Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender HD. And it's Monday, so you know what happens on Monday. It's Mondays with McCool, James McCool, paydirt_DFS on Twitter, and the co-author with me on the theory of daily fantasy sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass that you could pick up at theoryofdfs.com. If you're in the YouTube chat, Asuki Singh here first as usual. See real-life picture, Daniel Hutchings, Dear Sauceda, Alex Hooper, Anthony Golden, Matt Mears, Jim Steele, DFS Voodoo. The Voodoo is here. Card Fan is there also. Hit that thumbs up button. Give me those thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Preseason is over, James, for NFL finally. I could it's NFL season now. I'm past basically next Thursday. The first NFL game starts. It's on a Thursday. Obviously a showdown slate. I'm pretty much winding down my MLB play. I'm playing tonight. I'm playing. They have the Super Knuckleball or whatever. But I'll be focusing primarily on NFL. And the show goes on. Remember, this is the DFS pregame show. So Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Next Monday, we'll be doing an early MLB crunch time. So that'll be preempted then. But, there's still Monday showdown, Thursday showdown, Sunday slate, learning from Sunday slate, looking like there's tons of strategy stuff to talk about. There'll be shows here on RotoGrinders that we're coming out with the media schedule this week, I believe. So there'll be shows all throughout the week. All throughout the week, there'll be content. Sign up for RotoGrinders Premium, $10 off your first month with the link in the description. But James, I don't really pay attention to preseason. I see what happens on Twitter. It's on my Twitter timeline. I know what J.K. Dobbins is out for the season, right? Brashad Perriman just got cut. I keep up, whatever's in there, but I'm not playing the preseason slates, and I'm not looking at target shares and playing time and coach speak and beat reporters. Is there anything that you take out of preseason NFL that goes into how your model is working and how you're projecting week one? Because some of these players aren't even playing. Some of the starters that are going to be wide receiver one, they don't even play.
Right.
So how do you necessarily take anything out of preseason that is worth the crap?
You really can't. There are some situations where take the Jets, where we saw Corey Davis have a significant role in the preseason. And I know that the same way you do, because I just have Twitter. I don't really pay that much attention to preseason, but I'll go over and I'll go through the preseason stats with a relatively fine comb. I'll pay attention to target shares. I don't really care so much about snaps. That doesn't matter. In season, snap counts matter a lot. In season, how often a player is on the field matters a lot. But what matters in the preseason more is what happens when the player is on the field, right? So situations like Corey Davis for the Jets, he had a significant market share when he was on the field. So I'm probably going to be paying attention to that and going through that with my models and making sure that he has a decent market share. Situations like tight ends, where I think that it was somebody, it might have been Logan Thomas, that was on the field that had like a 24% market share or something like that. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but tight ends that have a significant market share in the preseason, that matters as well. Especially because tight ends, like, it falls off so hard that if you can find a tight end that is cheap in the beginning of the season that was getting a significant portion of the targets when they were on the field in the preseason, I do want to pay attention to that. But most of it is just production when they're on the field, and that comes from the starters. But even more so, it only comes from like situations that have a lot of variance from last season, right? So something like the Seahawks, right? Like, we know who the Seahawks are. We know that it's DK Metcalf. We know that it's Tyler Lockett. We know that it's Russ Wilson. That, like, we know what that offense is. We don't have to make that many changes to that offense. Situation like the Jets, we have to pay attention a little bit more and make some more guesses and make some more assumptions based on preseason stuff. But a lot of it is just the most important part, I think, for preseason is paying attention and seeing where there's an edge from people who are going to be paying too much attention to the preseason and not enough to last season. So because it's fresh in their heads, taking advantage of situations like that, I think, is important and something you can do in the first 4 weeks of the season.
Do you think that many people take so much out of preseason?
I don't think that a lot of casual people take a lot out of the preseason, but I think that there are probably still some industry heads that might pay too much attention because they have significant biases towards players that were either drafted or were kind of buried on the depth chart last year. And then they'll be like, oh, well, look how good they did in the preseason. They're going to carve themselves out a role. And, maybe it's not significant. Maybe they just give them a little bit more. Maybe they pencil them in as like the number 3 wide receiver instead of the number 4. Maybe they pencil them in instead of 3 into the 2 spot or something like that. But I think that you can glean that kind of info, and they're going to be giving that info to other people. It presents maybe like a 2% edge or something, but I do still think that it's worth noting.
Right. We noticed for the first week of NFL season that because the sites come out with pricing so far in advance, and they do that obviously for marketing purposes. They want people making lineups, building, and entering contests, and where they're not going to do it like they normally do, the Sunday night beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, they got so much lead time that let's fill up these contests, and people typically don't enter unless they can make a lineup. So the first week is, I consider the first week and the last week to be the most the weeks with the most aberration, the most possibility for salary inefficiency, because we have the first week because the prices are out for so long and people are cut, roles change, injuries, like it's wildly inefficient. And then the last week of the season, we have teams that are sitting people, and we get, a full team that has, all 3K wide receivers because you're playing cash games and you're playing against people that are not observant at all. I mean, the first week is great because you play the $3,400 guy that should be $6,000, right? You look around, you see so much good value, and you just jam as much of it in as possible. Yes, there's still variance in that, but there's most likely going to be inefficiently priced players. It's hard to get that wrong as a whole. Do you believe with me that, like you said, you think there's some people that take preseason too much into account, but I think that's a very small minority. I actually think that the biggest edge in NFL DFS is week 2, is when there actually is one regular season game that we could look and go, oh, wide receiver 1 on this team has a 35% target share in this game that we expected only an 18%, and now, oh no, they're the alpha of the offense now, and then they expect the next, they were 4,800 and they have 30 fantasy points because they went 11 for 15, or 11 for 150 and a touchdown. And now that they only got priced up to 5,400, like they're chalk, 22% owned. And then they come back down to what you projected to begin with, like an 18 to 20% target share. People take that one game sample size like way too drastically, either positively or negatively. That's the salary inefficiency is there in the first week, which is easy to identify. The ownership inefficiency to me is week 2, week 3, week 4, because by the time you get to week 14 and you have 13 weeks worth of data, which is still a small sample size. People think it's a big one, but it's not. At least at that point, you're more likely to be accurate, at least in the median range of outcomes of these players. But the second week, I mean, when we see this every year, people go by like last year's information and go, oh, this defense is good, that defense is bad, this run defense is good, that pass defense, right? But there's so much turnaround in the NFL that most of the time you don't even know what any of that is until halfway through the season. Taking advantage of that, I think, is more likely weeks 2 through 4 than it is week 1. I'm not saying week 1 people have their biases, but there's so much salary inefficiency on week 1. Sometimes the ownership sometimes we're gonna have people on week 1 that are 25% owned and probably under-owned, right? So like taking advantage of ownership isn't worth it as much, because you're giving up so much projection by doing so, that if there's going to be 3 guys that are significantly underpriced, that are 25, 30, 35% owned, it's quite possible their efficient ownership is 40, 45, 50% owned, and you should be playing them anyway. Yet you're going to hear a lot of talk on, oh, everyone knows that's the value play, so fade it. I think in week 1 there's just too many casual players in a lot of these big tournaments that just don't identify those salary inefficiencies. So do you I mean, first off, do you agree more with me? I mean, some people still think that week 1 is like, no, this is the biggest edge. And there's also people on the other end of the spectrum like, oh, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, so play lightly. And as a GPP player, I think the complete opposite. I said the more there is that we don't know, the consensus we don't know, that means there's more variance. That means there's more that I could take advantage of. It's much different on a week 16 slate where almost everyone is priced efficiently and there's not much that we don't know. So you're kind of like scraping by trying to find the small edge here and the small edge there. I think in the beginning of the season, there's much bigger edges. It's just that you have to be willing to embrace the variance of just go against the grain and hope most of the field is wrong.
Yeah. So first, I think week 2, 3, and 4 are probably the best week for NFL DFS. And there's a couple reasons why. The first one really for me is that people insist on using last year's data, which you mentioned. And saying,
don't you have to use last year's data to some extent, right?
So to some extent, yes, but I think there's a lot more guesswork involved. I think that people take last year's data too much into account. And like I said, with situations like the Seahawks, we know who the Seahawks are, but we have absolutely no idea who the Jets are. We have absolutely no idea who even a situation like the Dolphins, we can look at the Dolphins and you can say, oh, well, we have this data from last year on Tua. We have this data last year on Parker. We know who these players are. It's like in 17 games, you don't really know anything. You just don't. And in 9 games of Tua playing last year, where he didn't really know the offense, they said that they had to dumb down the offense, that he wasn't ready for it, blah, blah, blah. 9 games of Tua last year, we have no idea if that's who he's going to be this year. That year over year jump is pretty significant that we can have between quarterbacks or different offenses or different ways that players are put together, stuff like that. So even in a situation like the Dolphins, where you have to use a little bit of last year's data, but at the same time, this could be a completely different team. I think people use too much of last year's data and don't trust this year's data enough. And you know how I am with short samples. where I want to jump on things before other people do. Now, I'm not going to use that week 1 data and say, oh, this wide receiver is going to have a 35% market share. Like, I'm just going to plug that in, because you're right that he gets a $600 jump and now he is going to be way too owned. But I am going to look at that and say, well, maybe things have changed. And then I'm going to try to take advantage of people who are still using last year and take advantage of people who think that they know what this year is going to be. So I just think that embracing the unknowns is important in weeks 2 through 4, because people try to adhere and anchor on to what they thought they knew rather than embracing the new information. So it goes into that. I also think there's significant edge just simply in people playing defenses that they think are good. We know that defenses don't even stabilize until like week 8 of the year. And that's stabilize as much as we think that they do. And people will say, oh, well, the Washington football team's defense was really, really good last year, so I'm not going to attack them this year. And we've seen every single year, oh, well, the Jaguars were the best team in the league the best defense in the league last year. I can't attack them, and then they suck. The Bears, best defense in the league last year. I can't attack them, and then they suck. Like, it's every single year. The Panthers, it was the Panthers one year. Can't attack them, and then they're not good. And so I think there's a lot of edge in that. There's a lot of edge in just straight up attacking biases that you have from the year before, because that 17-game sample size, 1, is super duper small. And 2, there's so much change that happens over the offseason with players changing, schemes changing, coaches changing, QBs changing, positional, everything changes so much in the offseason that 17-game sample that was already small in the first place, it becomes almost insignificant. So there's a lot of edge in trying to take advantage of people's biases that they hold from the year before and overweighting last year's data. For me, I think there's a lot of edge in that. I just try to take advantage of a lot of the ownerships. I don't think that there is a lot that we can glean from the first game of the season. I think there's even less probably that we can glean from the second game of the season. But you can take advantage of people who are overweighting that kind of stuff. And taking advantage of ownership is the best thing to do in the beginning of the season for me.
Right. I mean, I take advantage of the defense stuff the full time I played DFS.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Like to me, the defense almost doesn't matter to me. I mean, I try to play good players regardless, just good players that are low owned because of that type of reason. I side with the with the talent over the matchup. And I do that in all sports. I do that in basketball. Oh, everyone's playing this guy because, they're playing the Sacramento Kings and it's a 235 total. And I'm playing Bradley Beal against, the Nuggets. And he's 1.5% owned. It's like, well, he's still Bradley Beal. I mean, he's still they're still star players. And even in quote bad matchups, they're not as bad as he should only be 1.5% owned. So like in these situations where, oh, you can't play this running back because they're facing the 3rd best rushing defense. It's like, well, is he a top tier running back? I'm gonna play Dalvin Cook at 8% owned. There's no problem with that. Oh, you can't play receivers against this team. It's like DK Metcalf could burn anyone. So, like, I'm going to play DK Metcalf at 4% ownership when everyone else is playing Devontae Adams in a cake matchup. Maybe I'm playing them both. But to me, it's not that defense doesn't matter. It's just that it's heavily overweighted by the field. That matchup dynamic or looking at coverage grades and wide receiver cornerback matchups. Does it matter? It's one of those BVP things. Like it probably does, but you're never going to know when it does or doesn't. And plus, we deal a lot of. Don't you believe that a lot of analysis, like game analysis, on trying to predict how the game is going to go, is built around rational coaching, like what they should do versus what they will do.
Yeah.
And our job is not that. Our job is to consider the range of outcomes of what they can do versus what they will possibly do. And there are tons of times we see, it's like, punting on 4th and 1 from the 38. I mean, like, dude, most of these coaches are bad. like just bad. And they're not going to do what our data is showing they should be doing. They're not going to give the touches to the people that they should be giving it to. They're not going to call the plays that they think they're going to change their mind week after week of go, no, we're going to go and attack this team. We're going to go and play. Unless you're in the closed practices, you have no idea how these coaches are going to act. And I think the field I think a lot of people try to, like, they're trying to predict an exact outcome based on what it's like, oh, well, they should be giving this guy 80% of the carries. Well, it should be. Yeah, I agree with you. They probably should be, but they're not. So, like, don't think in terms of, well, this defense is bad. People try to find all these data points. And then at the end of the day, you get to the game and it's like, oh, well, the coach doesn't care about what you scouted. The coach cares about what he scouted and he has 30 years of previous biases to go by, right? He has a job, obviously, to keep. I mean, we see with those 4th and 1 types of decisions and not kicking the field goal types of decisions, even on the broadcast themselves, you'll have old-fashioned commentators that are like, well, the analytics say that they'll put it up on the screen. They'll say, given the analytics, you should be doing this, but the coach isn't. And I agree, because you can't lose the game that way. Like some old, like trying to save your job type of things. Like if they kick a field goal here and tie the game, like none of the fans and they're not going to lose their job over it. But if they go for it, which is technically the right move, like, and fail, which they're going to do, and they're going to fail 42% of the time, then all of a sudden the newspapers read, the fire the coach types of things. And it's perpetuated that way. I think a lot of DFS, average DFS players fall into that type of trap of, I need to scout the game and figure out what these teams should be doing when you're not part of the NFL coaching staff. Like, if you're not at the practice field in close practice, like you're guessing as much as anyone else.
What I call Tony Pollard syndrome. The entire industry just knows that Tony Pollard is just so much better than Ezekiel Elliott. Like, oh man, if Tony Pollard got the Ezekiel Elliott role, like, man, he would be everything. Guess what? He doesn't. He just doesn't. Like, that they play Ezekiel Elliott because that's what they want to do. Tony Pollard's the RB2, and he's only going to get that role if Ezekiel Elliott gets hurt. And then, guess what? When Ezekiel Elliott's healthy again, he's going to be the starter. It doesn't matter what we think, man. Like, it doesn't matter what the biases that we hold are. It doesn't matter if we think that, like Chris Boucher, right? NBA. Man, DFS industry loves Chris Boucher. He is just God's gift to DFS because he's like 4,500. And when he plays 25 minutes, he's going to destroy that salary. Like, if he plays 25 minutes, he's putting up 37 fantasy points. And then the industry's like, oh man, if only he plays this many minutes. Oh man. And they want him to play that many minutes because they want him to be underpriced, because they want him to be this DFS winner. They want to win the GPP with this under-owned points per minute god. But guess what? He's only going to play 15 minutes because it doesn't matter what we want. It doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what our biases are. And so many people in this industry, really smart people, fall into this with players that they think are good in every single sport. It does not matter. Every single sport. There's so many people in this industry that fall into that trap of, oh, well, if the coaches were to just do this, then, we would be on easy street. It's like,
look, James, the past 3 years, I think the past 2 or 3 years, that I would say with what would end up, this is what would happen the past 3 years. 2 years, maybe? I think maybe 2 years. Christian Kirk is injured. It's Andy Isabella season. And then he plays 8 snaps. It's like no, like the Cardinals have 7 wide receivers, and for some reason he does. You may think he's a talented wide receiver. He probably should be the wide receiver 3 for the Cardinals. And then he plays his normal 7 snaps and gets 1 target. Maybe it's an end zone target. Maybe he does get a touchdown or something. But that happens all the time with
though.
Right, but it happens all the time with a run. Dalvin Cook goes down. It's Alexander Madison season, and everyone's like, "Well, he should be getting 90% of the snaps now." It's like, nope, 40% of the snaps, and you see Abdullah in there. You see Mike Boone in there.
Yeah.
They're going by committee, and it's like, well, this guy should. Like, well, they're not. Like, don't act as if like you know exactly. And that's why I always mention the practice field. It's like the biggest edge you could possibly have in NFL DFS is access to closed practices, because they're obviously going to be, towards Friday and Saturday, they're essentially going to be running their like first quarter script, like as practice. And whatever the coach's game plan is for that game is going to be revealed in that, that first, 20 plays that they draw up for that matchup. But you don't know that. Beat reporters don't know that. The only people that know that is the coaching staff and the players. Like, that would be a huge edge, because it'd be like, oh, they plan on giving one series to this running back and the other series to the other running back. We keep on thinking that this guy's going to get it 90%, or it could be the vice versa. Or it could be, they're going to be playing 2 tight end sets versus 3 wide receiver sets. But we don't have that information. That's the information that would be valuable, but we don't get it. Everything else would be speculating. And I find that when speculating, at best, you're getting half of it right and half of it wrong. And at best, you're not going to know which half is right and which half is wrong until after lock and the game starts. So I don't find it useful to project like it's going to be 2 tight ends versus 3 wide receiver versus they're going to run the ball X amount of times because of this. Like, I'm not a game film person. And it's because I don't think there's enough. I don't think the R, if we can measure the R of the watching the film to how it relates to DFS success, is just very weakly correlative. Not correlative, but like just so weak that like if you didn't do anything other than play the teams that have high totals and just stack those games, like over the course of a full season, you probably end up doing better than watching any of them.
Yeah, I think I don't watch sports except for like island games. And the only reason why I watch those is because I can watch them on my phone. And I probably won't be doing that this year because I have a kid now. And so
You're not going to watch Red Zone on Sundays?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? You don't even do that? That's fun.
No. I got other things to do. I like going out. I like going downtown. I like doing, and now that I have a kid, like I'm gonna go like to the aquarium or something. I don't know, but no, I don't watch.
So your Sunday series, your Sunday, while we're all sweating Red Zone, you're at the aquarium.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And like I'm paying attention. Like I'm paying attention to injuries. That's the only thing. Because like if there's a player that is questionable in the later games, right? Like I have to pay attention to that if I plan on having well, actually I have to pay attention to it if I have players in the later games, right? Because I have to pay attention to late swap stuff. If I know there's a wide receiver who is questionable, then I probably am going to try to build a lineup if possible to where I can late swap off of them if I have them, or to their replacement if I don't, if I think that it's a situation worth monitoring. Otherwise, I don't care. I'm just going to go about my day on Sunday because so much of the lock happens like at lock for NFL that I don't really care that much. I will watch sometimes the Sunday night game. Usually I will watch the Thursday night game. The Monday night game is a lot of garbage most of the time. So
Thursday is mostly garbage.
Thursday is that the way it is? Okay. So
yeah, typically Thursday is it's the Browns versus the Ravens and
something boring.
39 total or something, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll skip the Thursday game and usually watch the Monday game. I'll usually watch the one that's more exciting.
You're not watching to scout the teams or anything. You're watching the same way that you'd watch a television show. It's like,
yeah, I'm watching because I'm bored and because I have a showdown lineup.
Right.
I don't care. I'm not watching because I want to like see how these teams are treating their players. I'll see it in the data. I'll see the data. I don't care, especially with snap counts. Like a couple of years ago, when we didn't have reliable snap count data, I did watch the games because I wanted to know who was on the field. Not because I want to know how good they were, but because I want to know who was on the field. And that mattered. Now that we have snap count stuff, I don't care. I know that this player played 65% of the snaps last game, and I thought he was going to play 30%. Okay, well, I suppose I should look more into that situation. But if he played 35% and I thought he was going to play 30, like, all right, moving on. It doesn't matter. So I don't watch games. I think that watching the game should be something that you do to enjoy yourself. But a lot of people, and I don't even think that it's a conscious thing. I think a lot of people subconsciously will develop really, really nasty biases. We talk about it in theory DFS and psychology section. We talk a lot about developing these biases towards players and towards situations, towards circumstances that either confirm your priors or are going to significantly change the way that you think about situations moving forward when it's a one game sample size and it probably doesn't matter all that much anyway. So I try to avoid that kind of stuff. A lot of people are susceptible to developing those biases. And I tell people in the Discord that if you think that you are going to develop a bias from watching a player and you really care about your DFS play, like just be careful with it. Make sure you're telling yourself, this is a one game sample size, don't overreact to it, because so many people just develop those really, really nasty mental biases towards players, towards situations, towards teams that can really mess them up long term in DFS and short term.
Well, sometimes watching the games, you could actually is a benefit for getting context on certain things that other people don't have. Now, you can see it in the data, but sometimes what ends up happening is, we have, a two running back situation and the ball's like within the 10-yard line, in the red zone. And like we have the starting, whatever, the main running back gets stuffed like 7 times in that area. And like the other running back comes in like twice and gets both touchdowns. And you look at that and you go, gotta, they look at the touchdowns and not look at the fact that you really should be looking at goal line carries to begin with. It's like, no, some teams play with change of pace stuff where the person that gets the goal line carries just happens to be the one that happens to be in, right? One running back is on the field for, 2 first downs and then comes off. And then there's a big play, 32-yard pass to the 3-yard line. Well, the other running back ain't coming back on because he's already on the field. They're rushing up and they're going to run the ball in. Now, if they just progressed 10 yards and got a first down, then the other running back would come back in and they would go back and forth. So like a lot of the variance in running backs, to me, I think, I would hope you agree with this, that there are a lot of people that still think the NFL is the same way it was in 2015. And I think in the past 3 years, it has dramatically shifted. If you go back to old NFL DFS content, if you go on RotoGrinders, even back 2014, 2015, when we had David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, bell cow type stuff, type running backs. And you go like, well, running back is the most stable position, right? Typically, you find your safe floor points at running back, and it's the wide receivers that are highly variant, right? If there's a high-owned wide receiver, fade it. High-owned running backs are good. And to me, I think it's almost the complete opposite. I almost think that outside of maybe guys like Cook and McCaffrey, like guys that like are going to be on the field like almost 100% of the time, and even then it's changed a bit, that the touchdown variance for running backs is so big that I think top end wide receivers are actually less variant than them. I thought the guys like Devontae Adams and even Tyreek Hill, which you go back to 2017, it's like 8,000 for Tyreek Hill. You can't do that because he'll see 6 targets and hopefully he takes a long one. Can't play him at high ownership. You'd rather play, a possession receiver, or you'd rather play Sterling Shepard, right? Like someone like that instead. And I think there's still the majority of people that are building lineups like, okay, I'm going to take the 2 best running backs and I'm going to get different at wide receiver. And I found more success like to me, the high end wide receivers are the safest ones, and the mid range running backs. That's where I believe you could find cheap touchdowns because it's very similar, like in soccer DFS. Just to bring in, I know a lot of people don't play soccer DFS, but I do talk about it sometimes on Fridays. That the GPP strategies a lot of times is finding cheap goals. I'd much rather take a 5K forward from a slight underdog team that has less of a chance of scoring a goal. But if that team scores a goal, it's most likely through him. Then pay $9,000, pay almost twice as much for someone that has much better odds to score a goal. They're on a much better team, a bigger favorite, but it's soccer and goals can come from anywhere, right? He's the most likely to score, but he's the most likely to score at like 60%. But there's 9 other outfield players that could score that goal. So like in football, I view that as the running backs more so than the wide receivers. I could find a 5K running back that scores a touchdown. And at 5K, scoring a touchdown with 50 yards rushing, 60 yards rushing, 2 targets, 2 receptions for 20 yards or something, like for 5K, getting like 18 points out of that spot. That's not a big deal because there may be running back. We have some slates where there's no running back that scores more than 22 points total. There's none of them do. But at wide receiver, the high-end wide receivers have so much higher ceilings on DraftKings, especially because of the 100-yard bonus and the full point PPR, that like I'd much rather have in a GPP lineup just stack and I'm all 3 wide receiver. You'll see a lot of my GPP builds that have all 3 wide receivers are $6,500 or more. All 3 of them are. I'm playing Adams, Metcalf, and Hopkins or something, and paying down at running back, paying but 6K and a 5K running back. And my win condition right there is as long as I get touchdowns out of my running backs, and as long as a 9K plus running back like Cook and McCaffrey doesn't put up 50, like I'm probably ahead of those types of lineups, because the chances of a 4K wide receiver giving me 25 plus points, it happens, but it's almost unpredictable on if that's going to happen. And I think too many people think like, oh, I pay up a running back and let me play 3 of those 4K wide receivers and hope one of them what's the chances that 3 of them get there? That to win a large field GPP, you're going to need a lot more. And it's more likely the wide receiver 1 types, like I mentioned, they're going to be on the field like 100% of the time. Like unless they're injured, they ain't coming out of the game. Right? Occasionally, yes, they may not play 100% of snaps, but they're playing 95% of snaps. Why do I want to do that instead of playing? I'd rather do that than play a running back that has good touchdown equity, but only sees the field 60 to 65% of the time, which in this day and age in NFL is quite high. And I think people are overestimating running back production, because if you're not on the field, like you can't possibly score points. And there's just too many teams that on a week-to-week basis are willing to go with the hot hand or play very situationally. And I think much of the field overestimates their ability to predict that. It used to not be that. It used to be the target. Oh, it's harder to predict wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. It's like, to me, running backs are more tilting than wide receivers now.
Yeah. So I agree with all that, first off. And I also just want to add in that paying expensive running backs and paying down at tight end used to be the thing that you would do. That used to be the thing that you would do. And then you would take your stack with your quarterback, and then you would have the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. You'd pay down at tight end, you'd pay up at running back, you'd pay down at defense, and that was the way that you were doing things. That's not the way you should do things anymore. I totally agree. There are so many running backs and so many, like the mid-range running backs. Last year, it was like the Gibson and the Chris Carson, these mid-range guys that had a bunch of upside, not only because they were cheaper, but also because they did have receiving and touchdown equity. The thing that I pay most attention to when it comes to running backs is red zone touches. Like I almost don't care that much outside of like Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. I almost don't care that much at all about any of the other things outside of, is this running back frequently in when they want to score a touchdown? And like you said, there are situations like Tampa Bay Buccaneers where good luck trying to pick who they're going to use in the red zone, who they're going to use throughout the entire game. Like that, they just rotate running back. We've seen the Philadelphia Eagles do it as well. We've seen a lot of teams where they are dedicated to using a running back by committee. And trying to say, oh, well, this time the Bears are going to use, imagine if the Bears use David Montgomery in all this time. It's like, but they use other running backs. So David Montgomery, when he's 7K and going to be super popular and people are going to be playing him, instead of paying down a little bit towards a running back that is going to be getting 65% of the snaps just like him, going to be getting 7 red zone opportunities just like him, and is only 5,500, something like that. There's a lot of edge in doing that, paying down at running back and paying up for, I mean, Devontae Adams, he was automatic last year.
Well, how about 2 years ago with Michael Thomas?
2 years ago with Michael Thomas.
2 years ago, Michael Thomas was a cheat code. People were still not. He was 90. He was one slate. I think he was like 9,800, and I still had him as the most inefficiently underpriced player because he just woke up with 28 points. Like just walks out of bed with 28 points.
Yeah, and Antonio Brown as well a couple of years ago, where he was underpriced at 10K. He was underpriced at 10K and underowned. There were games where people would take Le'Veon Bell instead of Antonio Brown. They like Le'Veon Bell. I can remember specifically one week where it was the Steelers on the road against the Dolphins. They were like 13-point favorites, and Antonio Brown was like 13% owned or something, and Le'Veon Bell was 50% owned. So they're like, oh, they're going to blow the Dolphins out of the water. And then that came down to it. And Antonio Brown far outscored Le'Veon Bell because it was freaking Antonio Brown. Situations like that. I do think that wide receivers and premium tight ends, I wanted to add that in as well, because that's where I was kind of going with this. It used to be that you paid up at running back, down at tight end, tried to go mid-range or cheap at wide receiver. That used to be the way that you would try to do things. Now, I think there's a significant premium on tight ends, like significant. While people are hoping that last year it was Logan Thomas and it was Mike Gesicki and it was Chris Herndon, right? Like those guys, they're 3,500. We're going to project them for 19% of the target share. They're underpriced. Meanwhile, Travis Kelce is putting up 35 fantasy points every single game. And people aren't playing, like he's half the ownership of these cheap tight ends. Darren Waller, 30 fantasy points. Friggin' George Kittle, like these super premium tight ends. It's almost automatic that you can get 60 fantasy points out of your tight end and your wide receiver one, and people just choose not to do it and gamble on the cheaper alternative so they can pay up for Dalvin Cook or pay up for Christian McCaffrey. And I think there is a lot more when you consider ownership. Like maybe in a vacuum, those two things are relatively similar, right? Maybe in a vacuum, Christian McCaffrey plus a cheap tight end plus a mid-range wide receiver scores in the same range of outcomes as a cheaper running back with an expensive wide receiver and expensive tight end. Maybe it's close, but when you consider the ownership, you're getting your combination.
You're gonna get, it'll be half or a third of the ownership,
right?
Or more.
So if you have something, that's what I always tell people. If two players are projected similarly, and one is going to be 5% owned and one is going to be 25% owned, you would have to have so much leverage in the rest of your lineup to not just choose the less owned one in that 1v1. Like, how much leverage do you already have to have in order to just not take the lesser owned?
To take the extra 1.2 points in projection.
Right.
Yeah, you'd have to have some really, really wacky lineup.
Yeah, you would have to have the rest of your lineup would have to be basically like in the single digits for you to not choose the lesser owned alternative there, because you gain so much over the field and they're similarly projected. So you're losing 1 point in median projection so that you can have 20% less owner. That's gold. That's gold, Jerry. That is gold. So things like that. I think the ownership, and you and I talk so much about ownership, so much more, I think, than
Rostership. Rostership.
You and I talk so much more about leverage than I hear in.
Is leverage a good word? Can we say that?
I think we can say that. You know, I talk so much more about it than other parts of the industry, I think, and I don't think people talk about it enough. It's the single best thing that you can think about when you are building out your lineups, because projections are so efficient now, and so many people have access to optimizers and stuff like that they don't think enough past it. They don't. And I think that it's the biggest edge. Just think about ownership. Think about the way that you're putting this together. If you ever see two players, if you see Dalvin Cook directly next to Derrick Henry, they are both 8,900. They are both projected for 24 fantasy points. And Dalvin Cook is 7% owned and Derrick Henry is 35% owned. Dalvin Cook. I don't even know what would make me choose Derrick Henry over Dalvin.
No, but it would be pointless. I mean, mathematically, you'd be correct. But I have a feeling. But James, I have a feeling Derrick Henry's gonna get there. So I want to play him.
Yeah, well, your gut feeling is what we know about your problems with that. So, but let's not choose that one, and let's just go with one that's going to win you the GPP, man. People they fall into these biases and this group think. They're like, oh well, Graham Barfield told me that it's Derrick Henry week. You know, the
helicopter plays. You got to play the helicopter.
Yeah, the helicopters. They had Pat Thorman, the helicopter player, man. It's Derrick Henry this week. That's why everyone's going there. If these smart people think that he's the better play, then he must be the better play, right?
I put a Twitter search. How I choose my lineups, James? I do a Twitter search for SZN, and whoever comes up, that's who I play. I need to know what season it is. So basically, on Saturday night, screw the Schefter tweets. I'm looking for whatever insert player name season, and then I'm making my lineups. Right? Do you think that's a good process?
I do actually. So fun fact, that's actually how I do, in fact, build my cash game lineups. I just find the highest owned players and I just play them because that's what everybody else is probably doing. And then I block half the field. But in GPPs, man, I think that you could legitimately go to Twitter and look up season and fade at least one of those 5 players. Like take 5 players that you find on season on Twitter. Just go search season SZZ on Sunday or on Saturday, right? Because that's when people are really talking about who
I'm searching it right now.
Okay, all right.
Let's
find
see.
5 players, put them into a spreadsheet, and then close your eyes and randomly pick one. And that's who you fade that week.
Okay, yeah, we're not getting much.
Yeah, we won't get one until next week.
I may have to, right? Because there's also people talking about, obviously other than the NFL. Fred season. People have Here's some. That's a lot of soccer stuff. So I guess it's not just fantasy football.
Well, that people are.
For search from people I follow. Then now we get it. Now we get it. So here we go. 3 hours ago, Matt Kajeski, Amron Ross St. Brown season. That must be a college player. Tiny Home season, Colt McCoy season, Kyler season, Ray McLeod season. Right. So you don't get many, right? We're back down to August 26th. Right. Nintendo discount season. McColl season. Showdown season. Game log season.
Game log season.
Jake Funk season. The funny part is half of these are Eric Beinford doing it ironically. But yes, this will be, but if you do from people that you follow, right? Yeah. Obviously I'm following like fantasy football people. Right. So the week of you put that on and then you start fading people.
Well, and I mean, there's another way to do that too. Like if you have a fan share subscription, Like they literally, their algorithm for projecting ownership is actually based off of mentions and aggregation, right?
That doesn't seem
So
that precise.
it's really, really good. It's smart. And what they will do is they will take mentions and they'll take articles and they'll scour through things and they'll scour through Twitter. They have like a thing that pulls in names and they do sentiment-based analysis where that's how they are projecting out ownership. And you can see how often on their dashboard, how often a player is mentioned and whether it is good sentiment or bad sentiment. And you'll see how many, like one player, Andy Isabella's season, he has 12
Adam Troutman's season that week last year.
Yeah, like 13 positive sentiments, 1 negative sentiment. So 13 sources are saying play this guy. 1 is saying fade this guy. And they'll do that for you. You can aggregate, you can do that. Jordan, you are a man that loves to subscribe to things that do things for you. You don't even have to search season anymore. You can just go to FanShare. They'll do it for you.
Right. So I'll be able to get the XML and put in my season column into my model, right?
Right, exactly. I'm excited for NFL season, man. I'm always excited.
It's the biggest contest. I mean, that the reason why, I focus on NFL is because that's where the money, that's where the money is. And especially in the beginning of the season, towards the end, casual money kind of dries out, but it's still there. It's the most popular DFS sport by tenfold of any others.
Oh yeah.
Tenfold of all of them put together.
Yeah.
Going through the YouTube chat a little bit.
The nice thing for you is that you're already in the black because of MMA.
I'm in the black in everything other than golf.
Well, no, like
on the year, you mean?
Your year is already made.
Oh yeah, my year's already like there's no way for me to, based on my volume, there's no way for me to end this year not profitable.
Right. Yeah. And so you get to go into this stress-free.
Well, no, it's still stress. So what if I lose $60,000? Like that's a good thing? No, of course.
Stress-free, Jordan.
Stress-free. Cody Goddard from 11:16 a.m. I see the question. It would be way too complicated to go into it now. I would suggest, Cody, that you watch previous episodes of the pregame show. Go to theoryofdfs.com, get the 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. It's more than just, the question that you asked. Michael Dompe, I don't even understand the question. Do the DFS sites leave number of entries and contests relatively static for week 1, or do they increase it significantly? If the latter, does the impact in the EV enough to matter? No, they can't add. No, I don't understand that question.
So he's asking like if they are putting out the contests early and then adjusting the size before we.
No, but you can't. They're not allowed.
Yeah, that's illegal. So they can't do that. What did they do? How did FanDuel pull off that thing where they were giving away Bitcoin and it was unlimited entries?
Because it wasn't because they were giving out a prize.
Not
money or something. Who knows? I don't know. It was worthless to play. That was the highest ranked tournament I've ever seen in the history of DFS.
The worst tournament you ever could have entered. Ever. FanDuel, I think here's my theory. I think FanDuel doesn't care about their product anymore because they made so much in rake off of that one contest that they don't have to care anymore.
Do you notice on FanDuel I don't play there as often. I will for NFL. That sometimes they list the contest listings have the variable placeholders in them.
Yes, I do notice that.
Right, pool, name. Right, you go to your contest. It's like, how am I doing in name? Right, like really,
dude. That site is just trash, trash. And then, no, hilariously, it was NBA Top Shot hired their media or their like
community social media person or something, communications.
Read the room. Top Shot, read the room. We all hate FanDuel's community manager.
Yeah, but the games are soft, so that's why. That's when it comes down to it. You're gonna play where the fish are, right? You're gonna fish where the people are, right?
Yeah, you got to go to the right pond if you're gonna fish.
Right. So on FanDuel, I got all these tickets. I didn't even realize it. I won so many tickets, satellite things in MLB that like I have to play on FanDuel the first. I mean, I normally do, but I normally just play cash games on FanDuel. I just, build one cash lineup and that's it. But I just got I looked at FanDuel for the first time in like three or 4 weeks. And it's like, oh, you have 75 tickets to the Thursday Showdown contest. I do. And I have 100 for the Sunday Million. And I'm like, oh, I guess I need to make FanDuel GPP lineups now. So I guess I didn't realize how many satellite tickets I won during MLB season that they got me credited. And I'm like, it's one of those things where like I can't not put in entries.
Right. Yeah. It's $500 worth of entries.
Right. Like it's like the least I could do is go to lineup HQ and just put default and just whatever the top 70. I don't care if they're duplicated. I don't care about anything. Because by putting in no lineups, like you're throwing away, it's like it's infinite EV at this point. So you might as well just throw, even if I'm playing the same lineup 75 times, that's better than not putting anything in.
What you should do, you should go to lineup HQ. You should just set an ownership threshold, right? Of like, what is it for NFL? You want like less than 90%. I don't remember off the top of my head over on.
Right, whatever. I'd run the optimal and see what that is, and then find something lower.
Yeah, and then just like cut that in half and just throw 100 lineups that are super low owned in, and just like not even look. Who cares?
Does not even look. Right.
Doesn't matter.
You're describing my process. That will be my process for FanDuel on next Thursday, right? Because I'll be making showdown lineups on DraftKings, but I don't like FanDuel's showdown product.
No, it's super negative.
Right. I think on most slates there's no such thing as a plus EV lineup.
No, there's not.
I think if you simulated it out, like not everyone would lose.
I keep trying to tell people that, and they're just like, "Oh, what? But I only play on FanDuel." It's like, well, you shouldn't play those on FanDuel. You're just
right. You want to play for entertainment, sure, whatever. Yeah.
But don't come into my Discord asking me, well, what do you think I should do on FanDuel? I'm like, don't play.
Don't play, right? With the 15% rake, 5-man rosters, and 200,000 person fields. Like, if you want to play showdown, if you want to play the higher stakes, there are plus EV lineups in the higher, right? If you want to play 100-man, play 100-man. But the large field stuff, like I don't believe unless there are slates on showdown games where the teams are vastly have a larger roster. Like we see sometimes with the Colts, they'll use 5 wide receivers and 3 running backs, and it's like there's so many more viable projected players that maybe there are some less duped lineups, but other than those, like it's quite possible that you could make every combination of lineup, and it will be in that contest. And if you ran out the simulation, you don't win often enough for the time that every lineup is negative.
Yeah, if you had trying to think of super condensed wide receiver pools. If you had like the Seahawks versus the Chargers on FanDuel, like just don't even play that. There's
Vikings now.
Vikings, yeah. If you have the Seahawks versus the Vikings and it's on FanDuel, just don't throw your money away. There's like
play the smaller field. Like we're just talking about the large field stuff. I just want to make it clear.
Just large field. Play the smaller field if you want.
Right. Michael Dampier, I think he's clarifying his question. My last question wasn't worded great. More direct example. There are 1.2 million spots for the $5 Millionaire Game 1 contest. So week 1 contest, not. We're talking about the Thursday Showdown or the Sunday first slate. How many spots are there for that Showdown contest on Thursday? I don't even know. I'm going to take a look. So, I mean, it's going to matter. There'll be a difference. I'm going to go on my phone. So Showdown Captain Mode. Tournaments. No, it's not. No, he's talking about week 1. Because the Showdown slate, the $10 contest is 473,000 entries. So he must be talking about week 1. It's not unplayable. It's just that it's very hard to win. I mean, it's not there's no such thing as unplayable. There are tons of plus EV lineups for that. realizing that EV is good. You're going to have to live like 700 lifetimes in order to realize that. So, but it doesn't mean that it's not plus EV.
Yeah, the hard part about that is like you can play it for fun. Just play it for fun. It's entertainment value, right? You and I talk about that quite a bit. Like if you have $20, you can go see a movie. We're not in a pandemic anymore, so you can go see a movie, or you can put 4 lineups in the Millie Maker and
But build those 4 lineups to win the damn thing.
Well, absolutely, but don't ever look at it as like that. There are contests I think that I will enter because I think that I have a chance to win them, and there are contests that I will enter just because I am playing. You know what I mean?
But I don't think that the only reason I enter contests is because I'm plus EV. The thing is, I separate my volume based on how well I could realize that. So, for instance, this $5 Millie week 1, I will be playing.
Sure.
Am I going to play 150 entries? I'm not sure yet, but it's going to be a percentage of the volume that I play. The reason why I typically don't play the $20 Millie when it's offered most weeks is because I'm playing like maybe I'm playing $8,000 worth of volume. And I'm playing, 100 lineups into the $9 slant, right? I'm already allocating to better structured contests. I'm playing 3 into the power sweep, the spy. I'm going to play the $400 juke, and then I'm going to play like 5,000 in cash games. And it's like when it gets to the end of it, it's like, yeah, I could play 5 Millie right? 5 $20 Millie lineups because it only represents $100 out of $8,000 worth of volume.
Sure.
I'm not the type of person, I have $8,000 worth of volume. I'm going to if I maxed out a $20 Millie, that's $3,000 right there. So like it would represent like 37% of my total volume on a contest that I may be plus EV in, but realizing that it's like, unless you win first, you're dead type of things. Like I'm not going to devote that much of my bankroll on it. So
sure.
Here at a $5 level, if I play 150 lineups into it, that's $750. If I'm playing $8,000 worth of volume, okay.
Yeah.
Like for it to be, less than 10% of my total volume, okay, that may not be that bad. And even when the Millie is $20 and it's like, well, why don't you play 10 lineups into it? It's like, well, which 10 lineups am I playing? Like, I don't even want to use that time to think about it. So I just don't even want to
use that brain power to think through what to put in that contest.
Only because I play all unique. So it's like, what of those 10?
Right.
It's going to be, I'm already making lineups. I make all my lineups based on the slant anyway. So yeah, like the difference between the slant and this $5 Millie is actually humongous.
Yeah, gigantic. It's magnitudes different.
Right. Even though the slant I consider to be like, I need to be weird to play that kind of like nut. $5 Millie is like, you need the nuts, nut lineup. So it's like, if that was a $20 contest, it's like, choose your 5 most nuttiest lineups. It's like, well, those nuttiest lineups won't even be in the slant because I would think they're too, right? They're too weird, right? For even that contest.
Yeah.
So now I'm spending time to do that. And it's like for $100, $200 worth of volume, like it's not a priority to me. I don't need to win the Millie Maker. I think it's the worst structured contest in all of DFS. There are plenty of other contests where you can make money at that you don't have to bink once in 700 lifetimes.
Sure.
And if you get it within this lifetime, you're good. But there are plenty of sharp players that have never won the Millie or never come close. And there's plenty of sharp players that have won it multiple times. That doesn't make one better than the other. There's only 17 Millies, 18. There's an 18th game this year, right?
17,
but 18 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. So there'll be 8, but they're 18 games.
Yeah.
Right. So there'll be 18 Millies plus the showdowns. And to me, I'm more likely, James, if that contest was a showdown contest.
Yeah.
I would more likely play it, and people will be like, what, you're going to play a 1.2 million entry showdown contest? I go, yeah, I could realize the EV is there for that.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be so many, NFL showdown is nowhere near efficient.
No.
When it comes to, because I want there to be a lot of, the more entries, the better, because that means more duplicated entries.
And the more money up top.
Right. And the more money up top. And in showdown, you are literally only aiming for first.
Yeah.
At least in like normal GPPs, like it's like, oh, well, if I get fifth, that's fine. If I get fourth, I can make some money. If I come in the top 20, I'll be profitable. It's like, no, showdown. It's like you're either first or you lost money.
And I try to tell that to people all the time, and they're still like, oh, well, I can't fade this 50% on cap.
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
you should. Please fade him, unless there's like a super viable alternative. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. We're on
right. We'll have all the time in the world to talk about it. It's NFL season. It's season. SCN. It's thummy thumb season. Hit those thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button. It's subscribe button season. It's notification bell button season. It's Grinders Live season. Later today, they'll be going over the MLB slate. Crunch time season for premium members. It's premium member season. Hit the link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. It's Theory of DFS season.
It is.
So if you go to theoryofdfs.com, if you want to play DFS better, the game theory of DFS, no matter what the sport, NFL season is coming up. Brush up on your game theory of DFS. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. It has all of these concepts in here. Game objectives, player selection, expected value, leverage, correlation, construction, risk management, exploits, and psychology. Me and James talk you through everything. You could listen to it multiple times, right? It's not just for NFL. It's not, you do more of this, you do more of that. It's more math-based, but it's not like you need to memorize fancy formulas or anything. If you understand these concepts, you can do well. You could be profitable in any DFS sport, even MMA. Like, right? MMA. Even though MMA did not go well for me this past Saturday. It doesn't help my profitability when my highest exposed fighter gets knocked out with the first strike in 30 seconds into the fight. Against one of the highest owned dog fighters on the slate. And that guy is the highest score. That guy is optimal. So yeah. So if you want to learn, go to theoryofdfs.com. James is at paydirt_DFS on Twitter. And you'll be back. You'll still be here for NFL season, even though next Monday we're preempted by grinders by crunch time, by early crunch time, which I'll be on, just be a little bit 12:15. But I'll be on later this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Happy days. We'll still be discussing MLB. Like tomorrow, I think review today's slate for MLB, but it's NFL season. We'll be talking about NFL Showdown, NFL strategy, going Mondays and Tuesdays, going over lineups from Sunday, seeing what, Showdown lineups, everything. And then NBA will be back, and then we'll mix that in. So it's the DFS pregame show. So we talk about all of DFS, regardless of what is going on that given day. So James, Paydirt, if people want to get your model, that's at paydirtdfs.com, right?
Okay, so no.
No, it's not. What?
Okay, so I have two sites right now. I have my Ghost site and I have my WordPress site. So my DNS servers are actually directing to paydirdfs.com. Like it's not just an A name anymore. Like it's WordPress.
You actually knew it. You did it.
I did it. So that is going to the WordPress site right now, which isn't quite set up yet, but it's live because I'm not a web developer and I suck at this. But that's heading there. And then I have paydirt.ghost.io, which is where you can find all my stuff currently. But paydirdfs.com, the WordPress site, will be active before the NFL season starts. So I'm just in flux right now. By the end of the week, I'll have it figured out.
Okay. Well, we could find all your stuff over there.
Yeah.
Okay, doke. So thummy thumbs on your way out the door. And I will see you tomorrow, as I always do, Mondays through Fridays, 11 o'clock Eastern, for the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.